Fidji Simo, the daughter of a fisherman from a small French village. She ran Facebook's app and founded a nonprofit to tackle women's health challenges. Today, she's on the boards of OpenAI and Shopify. She is the CEO of Instacart. Fidji Simo is a CNBC Changemaker.
I want to rewind to 2020. You're on the Instacart board. Instacart is growing dramatically. It is a vital solution for people during the pandemic. But then 2021 comes around, you become CEO, and we start to see some of the advantages that Instacart saw from the pandemic and shifting consumer spending start to fall apart. And Instacart was dealing with the fact that people are no longer buying all of their groceries online. What was the moment when you realized that Instacart needed to have bigger ambitions, needed to diversify away from that? Was it before you became CEO? Was it after you became CEO?
It was definitely before. I knew what I was getting into. You know, I joined in the summer of 2021. It was, as you said, really past pandemic peak. And so our gross transaction volume was declining double digits. We were kind of the poster child for an unprofitable company. And so I knew that I had my work cut out for me to turn the company profitable, reaccelerate growth, and really take the company to the next level. And that's what I set out to do. And I really think that what I saw was the need to not just capitalize on the pandemic, which was important for people to discover that grocery delivery existed, but also show them that this is a service that's essential to daily life well past the pandemic, that it could make their life a lot easier, save them time, allow them to make better nutrition choices. And that's why we really developed a plan to reaccelerate growth that has led to the good results we have today.
When I think about the challenges that you faced as the new CEO of this company, I think about all the research there is about women being put into tough situations as CEOs. There's this phenomenon called the glass cliff scenario, where women are more likely to be named as CEO of a company when it's facing a precarious financial situation or new challenges. Do you feel like you were in a glass cliff scenario? I also have to say that the data shows that women are more likely to overcome those scenarios and succeed in those situations. But when you were the new CEO of this company, did you feel like you were going to be able to succeed because you knew your plan, or did you feel like it was going to be tougher? So
I learned the glass cliff, name after becoming CEO. But I would tell you, it's funny because when I describe kind of what I took on, a friend of mine said, "Oh, you were dropped at level 25 of the CEO game when the zombie apocalypse is combined with mine explosions," and it felt a little bit like that. But at the same time, I also think that that's where the greatest opportunities can arise, because in my view, if you take something simple that's already a rocket ship, you don't really know the impact you're having. Whereas if you take something pretty hard and you actually, are a driver and take it to the next level, and you can feel proud about what you've accomplished. And so I actually jumped into it knowing it would be hard. And that wasn't the first time in my career I did that. Back at Meta, the reason my career accelerated so much is because I was taking the bets that were, things that people definitely weren't jumping into, things that people had doubts about. But when you have your own conviction around your strategy, your plan, and you actually see a way to turn something around, you end up actually minimizing the risk. Everybody else sees it as very risky, but you have conviction in your plan, so actually the risk is fairly minimized. So that's how I see the glass ceiling. I think that's how the best careers are made, when you have an opportunity like that and you turn it around.
Crisis creates opportunity.
Exactly.
So how do you figure out the strategy, though? I mean, you have conviction in the strategy and you're ready to execute, but what do you do to figure out what that strategy should be? Were you figuring it out when you were, identifying the financial trends back when you were on the board? Are you talking to different people across the organization? What is your system for coming up with a strategy?
Yes. So my team would tell you I'm very in the details. I believe that in order to have the 10-year view, you need to be in the details of execution today. And that means I go very deep with my team. I ask a lot of questions. And, my first few months in the job, I told the team, there's going to be a lot of dumb questions in there, but I want to know everything about this business. So I spent a lot of time really understanding the details, because it was a very different business from Facebook. It's a logistics business, very different from Meta. So I really wanted to understand that. The other thing I did is be very focused on understanding our customers, whether that's the end consumers that we serve, but also our retailers, our brands, our shoppers. So I spent lots of time really understanding what is their day-to-day, what do they need, why would they pick us? And our retailers, whether that's Kroger, Publix, Wegmans, Costco, have been so critical to sitting down with me, explaining to me their business and the role that Instacart could play in solving their problems. And very often we would realize, actually, they didn't even imagine that Instacart could solve that. But because I understood how their business worked, I was able to come up with more opportunities to serve them. And that creates a virtuous cycle and more opportunities for the company.
And it seems like for you as a leader, you don't see the world as a zero-sum game.
No.
And it's fundamental to your approach at Instacart that you're going to be building your business. There will be rivals, but you're going to figure out ways to take grocers who theoretically could also be seen as rivals and make them your partners.
Yeah, to me, it's so obvious that this is such a big shift that there's more than enough place for a lot of partners to win together. And in fact, by joining forces, you can win even faster. Like when we join forces with grocers, we give them technologies that would take them years and extreme capital commitments to build. Whereas with us, we make this big R&D investment that we then amortize over 1,500 grocers. So we really give them superpowers that they couldn't get on their own. And that's incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, so much of your approach seems so unique and different from the way other leaders might have approached this business. And I want to ask you where all of this came from. And you have a very unusual background for a tech CEO. You are not only a woman, which is very rare in the world of tech CEOs, but obviously you are also French. And you were the first person in your family to go to college. You came from a small village that did not create a lot of tech CEOs. So I want to understand what it is about your background that gave you the insights and the approach that you have today. What was your family like?
That's such a great question, and that could take 2 hours. But I grew up in a family of fishermen. All the men in my family are fishermen for many generations. And while you could think of it as like, oh, it's so different from tech, the way I think of it is that I actually had a front row seat to leadership very early. Like if you're captain of a boat, which my dad was, my grandfather was, knowing how to lead a crew is absolutely critical. And in fact, it's a matter of life or death at sea. And therefore, I had a front row seat to what servant leadership looks like, where you are at the front, you are making the decision, but ultimately the goal is to serve your team and to achieve great results together. And so I took these lessons with me, for the rest of my life. And I would say the last thing that really shaped me is that I have a very deep belief in hard work. I saw my dad go to work at 2 a.m., come back at 8 p.m., covered in fish scales. And my family had a deep belief that if you work hard and you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. And I think that allowed me to have the ambition I have, even though I didn't grow up in, a family or even a city that, was aspiring to end up in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, certainly the hard work and the work ethic. But what's so interesting to me is also this willingness to take risks is something that you saw with your family, but also is essential in the tech ecosystem. Tell me a little bit about your openness to technology, because fishing you don't think of as a very high-tech field, but in fact you saw your grandfather engage with technology in a way that sounds like it was a good model for you.
Yes, my grandfather was really innovative, and he knew how to find the best fish. He was an absolute expert at that, and he would do that manually on maps drawn with pencils. And then one day this new technology came along called the sonar technology, where it can basically locate the fishes for you. So all of a sudden, his entire competitive advantage against other fishermen was gone. But instead of thinking, oh, I'm gonna rile against technology, he was like, no, I'm really interested in this new machine, and I'm gonna spend a lot of time with the technician who invented it to understand it better than anyone else and rebuild an even bigger competitive advantage by using technology. And I think that's such a profound lesson that, it's not just about your current skill set, but it's about having a growth mindset where you can integrate technology to always maintain your advantage.
Yeah, clearly you are a leader with a growth mindset. And also I think it's so interesting what you said about servant leadership, this idea that your job as a CEO is to not just serve your investors, but also, even more importantly, serve your customers and your employees. And that's something that female leaders are more likely to do. It's an effective tool for anyone, but it is something female leaders are more likely to do. So I think that's really interesting. So you've explained how your family business influenced your approach now, your willingness to take risks and try new technologies. But what inspired you to leave the fishing village, to not get into the family business?
Well, I'll tell you, the reason I love, news and media and entertainment is because when you grow up in a place like that, like the only window you have to these kinds of opportunities is actually through the media. And I watch a lot of American television, and the idea of an American dream really came from watching, US TV shows. And people expect a very business-like story for why I decided to come to the US. It wasn't. It was like the American dream was on TV every night, and I felt that that was an incredibly appealing thing. And so I decided to leave pretty much right after college for the US. I was incredibly lucky to have met my husband early. Otherwise, I don't think I would have had the courage to live on my own and then go live my American dream.
And so first to eBay, then to Facebook, and now to Instacart. So you had this fantasy of the American dream thanks to the media, but you also had to accomplish something really hard in being the first one in your family to go to college. How did you go from this small town to business school in Paris?
I worked incredibly hard, but yes, even from, before you go to business school, there's this thing in France where you have 2 years of prep school basically to get there. And even there, from where I was studying, very few people were making it to the top business school of the country. But I was lucky to find great professors who would literally take me under their wings after hours and realize that, I had absolute desire to succeed and would help me on the side and really build up my confidence, because I didn't know if I could do it. And so that's how I ended up, on the benches of HEC.
It's just so amazing. And to me, what's so impressive about your accomplishments is that you're driving a lot of change, right? That's what it means to be a change maker. But you also seem to have a very distinct sense of purpose. Mm-hmm. And we've seen here in Los Angeles that you've done so much with Instacart to help people who are impacted by the fires. You also have taken a lot of steps to make Instacart more available to people who are in financial support through the government. How do you think about your purpose and your ability to drive change beyond just accomplishments financially for your company through Instacart?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important to understand what your mission is, and both personally and at your company. And I also really believe that doing these things align with driving better business results. I actually, the point you made on expanding access to food, it is absolutely the right thing to do and helps a lot of people, and also aligns with, Instacart's economic interest, which is a good thing. Like when business and purpose can align, you get, massive acceleration. And so to me, it was like when I arrived at Instacart, I was already seeing this vision that we were at the intersection of the relationships that people have with the food they eat. And therefore, we had a huge role to play in giving them access to food, giving them access to more nutritious food, and helping them ultimately with their health. And that's a really big passion of mine, and something that we could realize through a company that is fundamentally helping people put food on the table.
Yeah, there's been so much research about the value of aligning purpose and profits. And it seems like that's what you're trying to do increasingly at Instacart. Were there ever any challenges of getting people on board with that mission?
No, because I think it's all about unleashing in people the realization that they can create, they can be part of change, and I can do it alone. So a lot of what I do at my company, I spend a lot of time thinking about communicating to my employees so that I make them realize the important role that they can play in this mission. And then when they get a taste of that, they're like, wow, this is so much power that we can use for good. The events in LA were a great example of that, where overnight, we gathered a bunch of employees and pretty much built an entirely new product, like over the course of a night. Everyone stayed awake overnight. We didn't sleep, but the sense of purpose of this idea of we can enable all of these people who want to help LA but don't know how, literally deliver food and daily essentials to evacuation centers. That was such an inspiring moment, and one of the highlights that a lot of people who were there at the time will have of their career at Instacart. So again, you can do a lot of good and at the same time really inspire your employees to align with the mission.
You've given me chills. Yeah, and it's amazing the value that comes when employees are empowered. You also face some personal challenges, and instead of just dealing with them yourselves, you decided to have a greater impact beyond that. Tell me about some of these medical challenges that you faced and why you decided to launch a whole new company and try to help other people through this.
Yeah. In 2020, I was diagnosed with a chronic condition called POTS, and it's basically at the intersection of the nervous system and the immune system. And, it really impacts quality of life. And at the time, it was interesting because I realized I could either focus on how unfair it is and how much of a hurdle that's going to be in my future, or I can see that as an opportunity to actually have a new purpose and figure out how to help others through this situation. And one saying that I really like is you cannot control, but you can create. And I certainly couldn't control what was happening to my house, but I wanted to create something positive out of it. And that's how I founded Metrodora, which is a research center and a clinical center to advance cures for these conditions.
And to be running this huge company and also to be building this, and obviously you have a partner working with you at Metrodora, but you have this sense of the opportunity you have to help people. What comes across to me is a sense of positivity and empowerment and creativity. And all I think is that you were successful not just because you worked hard, but because you have an approach to leadership that is really distinctly you. How would you define your leadership style? What would you say your leadership superpower is?
That's so hard to define. I think I have an approach of abundance, which is exactly what you're saying. It's this approach that there is a world of possibilities, and you can either put your attention on the negatives, and if you put your attention on the negative will grow, or you can put your attention on solutions. And if you focus on solutions, they become more apparent, you attract them faster. And that's why, every time something happens, I'm like, okay, this was an obstacle. I'm not going to focus on the obstacle. I'm going to focus on the destination. And that has really given me, I think, a lot of power to, again, create outcomes that maybe others would have missed because they would be too focused on the hardship, whereas I try to focus on the potential solution.
That's such a good lesson for everyone. You talked about your solution to your personal medical challenges and how you use that as an opportunity. What were the biggest professional challenges you ever faced?
Well, as we talked about, becoming CEO of Instacart wasn't a walk in the park.
And then also you took Instacart public at a moment when everyone said, there's no way you're going to be able to take this company public. Yeah. The market was very quiet. That must have been a huge challenge.
Yeah, I think it was the biggest tech IPO drought, and we reopened the IPO window. And that was an important moment because we had employees that had been working at the company for 10 years, obviously wanted to see a payoff for all of that work. And I felt a huge responsibility to be able to enter the market. But the market really was not ready at the time. So we really reshaped the company to get it IPO ready. And then as soon as the market gave us a window, we rushed through it. And that was a huge satisfaction to be able to deliver on that.
I think it's funny that when I ask you what your biggest challenges were, you almost can't think of what they were because you thought of all of them as opportunities.
Well, I mean, another one, that's a good example is the inflection point of my career at Meta was really being put in charge of monetizing mobile. And at the time, the headlines that were running nonstop were, Facebook can never monetize mobile. Mobile is too small of a screen.
It was an existential threat for Meta. I remember,
yeah. Stock down 50%. And so, that makes you a little bit sweaty when you're in charge of figuring that out. But at the same time, I was like, it's so existential. If I can crack this with a team of excellent people, we can really like do some good for this company and really have a big impact. And so, once I saw that could work, then I reproduced that in a lot of other areas. Video was another one. And that became a little bit of a challenge to tell myself, okay, like I can take these hard problems, turn them around, and really feel like a driver, not a passenger.
Yeah, I love that. And this reframing, so you're in control and you're empowered, just like you're empowering your employees. So what are your tricks to not get discouraged, to not have that moment where you're like, this is impossible?
So my biggest trick, it's a brain trick really, is to kind of live in the future where the problem has already been solved. If you're too deep in the moment where, everything is hard, you can get swallowed up. And so I spend a lot of time really trying to experience, okay, what does it feel like when obviously this thing has been solved, when everything is going according to plan. And when you spend more time in that world, a lot of new ideas come your way because you are in a mindset of abundance, not a mindset of scarcity. So better ideas land. And so I also gave a big trainings through my coach, Katja Veresen, to all of my VPs to think that way. So, there's a lot of leadership training, but for me, the biggest thing that I can teach my leadership team is really to be in that mindset of creation for as long as they possibly can. And so that's what we train on. That's what the culture is based around at Instacart.
You talk a lot about creativity.
Yes.
How do you think about being creative in your everyday life at work and also outside of work to feed the creation at work?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an artist in my spare time. My Saturday afternoon are sacred. This is time that I spend with my daughter, and we create all kinds of things. We do mosaics, we do pop-up art, we do painting, sculpting magic wands together. I don't go a week without having some form of creative practice because I think it's so important to be reminded that you can do and create something from nothing into something. And that's what I teach her as well. It's like you have the power to go from nothing to something. And the more you remind your brain of that, the more the next time there's a difficulty, that you can create something out of nothing.
So this approach, leadership, empowerment, creativity, really getting in the weeds to understand the people that you're serving, servant leadership. Was this the way you always led, or is this a strategy that has evolved over the years?
I think I always had it in me because, again, of the way I was raised. There was no place for victimhood in my family. My grandfather was raised from at age 5, he was scrubbing the decks of the boats, and that was a really rough job, never went to school. But not once did I hear him complain about any of that. I heard him have these grand plans for one day owning his own boat, building his own boat. And then I saw him be able to do that, And so I think having those role models and this mentality helped me never fall into victimhood and always look for the creativity in situations.
You're so unique and you stand out in a sea of male tech CEOs. 90% of all public company CEOs, the Fortune 500, are men. And you lead into your femininity and you dress in, amazing fashions. How has that approach and fashion fit into your leadership style?
The main way to explain it is that I don't know how not to be me. And so, there has been times in my career where people have said, well, if you want to really bond with engineers, you need to tone it down and wear hoodies. And I did that for a day and, I didn't feel like myself whatsoever.
So you tried it. You tried toning
I tried it, not for long, but I even at some point took accent reduction classes at Stanford. Clearly, it did not work. And so, at some point I'm like, I can put all of my energy trying to be someone else, or I can, be myself and pour all of that energy into what I can create. And when you think of it that way, the answer becomes pretty obvious. But it's not that I'm trying to make a statement. It's just I was raised like that. I was raised French. My mom had a shopping boutique. She loves fashion. And so it's really about setting the example that we're at our best when we can be ourselves.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You tried it on for a day, and you're like, "This is just a waste of my energy." You lead with such feminine energy, and in my book, When Women Lead, I talk about these traits that are more typically female leadership traits. But right now, we're in a moment where so many leaders and male leaders, including Mark Zuckerberg, have said there's a need for more masculine energy and leadership. What do you think that means? And do you agree? What's your response?
Well, I'm not in Mark's head, but what I can tell you is I think there needs to be a balance and a need for both. I actually think that women need masculine energy too to be able to lead. Like, I have to make very hard decisions day in, day out. And sometimes that requires some of that, more masculine energy, some of that aggression. That's okay. But I balance that with a lot of, the values that we talked about that are more feminine energy. And I think that's true for men too. I think they do benefit from being able to express their masculine energy. And I also think that, balancing that out with some of their feminine energy is great. So I think the most important thing is that we let people use all of these different tools, all of these different styles, so that they can achieve great outcomes.
And let them be who they are, just
Exactly.
like you didn't want to have to dress in a hoodie. It wasn't you.
Exactly.
You work so closely with Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg, and I know they both admire you and respect you so much. Do you feel like you learned things from both of them that have impacted the way you're leading Instacart?
Oh my God, so many things. I think the most important thing as a leader is to have this very long-term vision and the short-term execution. And that's something that Mark and Sheryl did so well. Mark was always, giving us a very long-term view and a sense of mission that was very ambitious. But at the same time, the execution day to day was a top priority. Otherwise, you never reach the long-term vision. And I really took that with me to Instacart. It's rare to have leaders who have both. You have great visionaries that are not great operators. You have great operators that don't have vision. And, Mark and Sheryl showed us that you can combine both and that it's incredibly important to run a company.
And you need both to succeed for
Absolutely.
the long run. Do you have any mentors now? Are there people you go to now, either for inspiration or to guide you through tough moments?
Well, I still sometimes go to Mark. But, I think now it's more of a network of peers and having, a set of CEOs who are going through the same challenges. For example, by being on the board of Shopify, I learned an enormous amount from Toby, the CEO. It's a company that has had just an incredible success story, and he leads in a very different way from me, but with a lot of things that I have been able to learn from him, and hopefully vice versa.
And you've been on the board of OpenAI for less than a year, but now you have a front row seat to one of the most transformative and powerful companies in this new AI-driven economy. How is that experience influencing your approach to what the next big trends are going to be and how you could bring them to Instacart?
Yeah, I think, we are at an incredibly interesting moment in time where AI is going to generate so much economic growth, so much transformation, and it's going to enable us to really find solutions to existential problems like health that we haven't been able to crack with the tools at our disposal right now. So as a creator, because we're talking about creativity, I look at AI as this magical tool that can help us create so much more. Now, it also comes with challenges that we obviously need to mitigate, but I think we're about to witness the golden age of creation because we are really democratizing tools that are removing barriers for people to be able to create. So I'm incredibly excited about that. And I think that's going to impact both the day-to-day. At Instacart, we are using that to help people figure out what to put on the table for dinner, how to figure out how to eat healthier, and use AI to really guide them through these choices, all the way to grand challenges like scientific breakthrough.
It's also inspiring, and you're so optimistic, which is so important. And I know you have to go back to running your company and serving on these boards, and you have your family, but a couple of quick final questions just on the logistics of how you are doing all of these different things. Do you have habits or rituals or systems in place that have enabled you to accomplish so much? And also to continue to make art with your daughter on Saturdays?
Well, I think it's actually that. It's I realized very early on that time was actually malleable. If you are very intentional on how you spend your time and very present in how you spend it, the 3 hours that I spent on Saturday afternoon with my daughter making art count for so much more because we're always going to have those memories. She's always going to remember those moments, and same for me. But in the moments where I'm not intentional and we're spending a lot of time, but I'm not fully present, I haven't really had a plan for how to create this amazing moment, then this time is just much less, lower quality. And so the biggest hack in my mind is just intentionality and presence, so that you can, combine all of these things in your life, but every single minute you're giving your absolute all to the people in front of you.
Well, that is a perfect note to end on. And we appreciate you being so intentional in your time with us and sharing this amazing vision for leadership that's so inclusive and positive and empowering for the people who work with you. And it's great to get a window into the woman who has transformed Instacart and having ripple effects across several industries. So Fidji Simo, thank you so much for joining us here and for being a change maker.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was lovely.